G'day ladies and gents, and welcome to the plane that single-handedly won World War II. Yes, that's right, we're looking at the P-51 Mustang. That was a joke, by the way. Yeah, P-51. The P-51d5 to be exact. This plane is a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. It's neither good nor bad. And in the current state that it's in, I would say that it is not bad. But it's neither the meta, nor the worst plane in the whole bunch. It requires a lot of patience, a lot of time, and you need to spade it. They're your crucial things. As well as getting altitude and playing boom and zoom. Don't try and be a hero in turn fight, because it doesn't work. This is the one plane that I've heard people having a lot of trouble with when they get into the game. They grind their way up through the P40s and the P36s, and they turn really well. The P39 is a bit of a brick, but it can still hold its own. You get to the P47s, and they're big juggernauts. They sort of sit at altitude and run fast and turn reasonably well at very high speed for some reason. And then you get to the P51, which seems like it doesn't climb. It seems like it just sort of wanders up to altitude, and by the time that you're at 4,000 meters, the enemy is at 6,000 meters and diving on you. So what you've really got to do is climb off to the side a little bit. You need to side climb, you know. You climb off where you think the enemy is not going to be, which is normally one way or another, either to the left or right of the airfield. Now, that's heavily dependent on the map, and you'll eventually learn which way everyone likes to climb. But in the meantime, you've got to pick which way to side climb, and I wouldn't recommend AFK side climbing like I'm doing now. As you can see, the shadow play counter is in the top left corner of the screen, and that basically means that I've alt-tabbed and I'm probably watching some stream or like typing or something like that. I wouldn't recommend doing that, actually. I would personally recommend monitoring your speed and your WEP quite closely. And I would definitely suggest that you find a good speed to go at. And for me, that seems to be about 300 kilometers, about 300 kilometers indicated airspeed. Now, you did see me switch there from true airspeed to indicated airspeed, and essentially the only difference is indicated airspeed that changes with altitude. So your indicated airspeed gets a lot lower at higher altitudes, whereas true airspeed tends to stay the same. Now, I would like an option to have both of them on my screen, but unfortunately you don't get that. And as a result, you've got to sort of pick between one or the other. Now, I've decided to go back to indicated airspeed so that I can get a good look of my initial climb, which is, to me, is more important than the high altitude fight. Because I know if I'm outrunning someone, I'm outrunning them, and if I'm being chased, I'm being chased. And to me, it's more important that I get the climb right than I get the combat right in terms of speed, because I know that the basics of speed and the basics of the plane and how they function in the meta. Now, as you can see, I'm at about 3,800 meters, and that's about the lowest you want to go in a P-51, because the P-51, at least the D5, performs really, really well at high altitudes. It's got, I think, a 2-stage supercharger, which one gear kicks in at 4,000, the other kicks in at something like 6,000. I think. Someone let me know in the comments section, but you've just got to get altitude, and you've got to be above the enemies, and you've got to be faster, which isn't really easy. By the way, that skin that I'm running on the P-51d is a marketplace skin, so if you want to look cool and also throw a couple of shekels at Gaijin and throw a couple of shekels at the creator of the skin, then go for it. Bit of marketplace. I quite like that marketplace skin. It's really pretty, and it reminds me of the I believe it's the Big Beautiful Doll one. Oh, I can't remember what the name of the Mustang is called now. But essentially it's got a yellow nose, and I believe it's got invasion stripes. It's a really, really pretty plane, and it looks very, very similar. If someone in the comments can let me know which one I'm thinking of, that would be awesome as well. But yeah, essentially the P-51 Mustang isn't a turn fighter. Whilst at high speed you do get a considerable amount of turning capability, I certainly wouldn't recommend using your turning capability in combat. This plane excels at high altitude and high altitude speed, which is why it's got a Merlin engine, and that's what the Merlin engine does. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the targets that are below me, but I'm also looking to spot dots that are above me, because I know that a dot above me means there's an enemy fighter that is at least my altitude or above, which is dangerous, which is very dangerous. Essentially, if you're caught at low altitude or at lower altitude than an enemy that turns better than you, you really don't have much to pull. You can use your team, but I wouldn't recommend using your team because they're extremely unreliable. I wouldn't recommend much else, really. There's nothing really that you can do. Now, another thing that I wouldn't recommend is head-on passes in the P-51 Mustang. Whilst it does have 650 caliber machine guns, it's not really going to save you. It really is not going to save you. They're only 650 cals, and there's every chance in the world that you're going to be killed in a head-on with a HE-219. So go for the kills that you think are more important, but don't force a head-on. What you've got to do is you've got to wait for the enemy to be distracted by your friendly units, and then you go for them, which is what I did perfectly with that G55. And now you can see that I'm picking up some speed in a dive, and I'm going to go for that P-47, because I know it is a very, very, very valuable target. I get some shots and I miss, and I can see he's starting to evade. I don't know why I follow through, but I decide to anyway, because I thought, fuck it, why not? And then I see another P-47, so I just go for the vertical. Go and store that energy, that kinetic energy, back into altitude, and now he starts to pull onto me. I'm using the rest of that speed to maneuver. Now, maneuvers are very, very speed costly in the P-51, so he manages to actually dive away from me. And this is something that you should do very, very sparingly. You should really, really consider keeping your engagements in straight lines and vertical maneuvers only. What I'm doing here is I'm playing extremely aggressively because I know that the enemy team is on low energy. You shouldn't do that unless you know that you have absolute supremacy over the sky. Otherwise, you will get shot down because the P-51 Mustang is not a maneuverable plane, and it is not a dogfighter. Not the D5, because the D5 is substantially heavier than the D20, the D30, and even the D10. So that's my third kill on a P-47. Now, this pretty much is where the match essentially ends. The P-51 has pretty much been the go-to boom and zoomer for a lot of people, more specifically the D30. But the D5 also has its merits. It's extremely, extremely fast at high altitude. So what you've got to do is use that high altitude capability and make sure that you capitalize on that as much as you possibly can. Use your teammates and use your high altitude speed, and you pretty much can't go wrong in this plane. It's probably the best plane for that job at 4.3, with the exception of maybe the P-47, because it basically does everything better. However, the merits of the P-51 cannot be understated. It still maneuvers quite well. It maneuvers okay with flaps. Don't use anything more than combat, because you'll bleed too much energy. But overall, the P-51d5 is actually surprisingly fun to fly. And it's really, really rewarding because it's got that underdog status. No one really likes the D5. They all go for the D30, which rightly so is the far superior plane. And honestly, the P-51d5 is quite usable in a squad. The more people that you have working with you, the more the P-51d5 will shine. And as a result, you'll tend to have better games. So I would recommend when playing the P-51, keep your altitude, keep your speed, make sure you side climb, take teammates, avoid head-ons, and work to stall out enemies together. And that's where you get the good kills, the most fun, and you'll end up grinding a lot faster, and you'll just enjoy yourself a hell of a lot more. So the P-51, whilst it's certainly not the best plane of the battle rating, that would easily go to the G2 Tropical without a doubt. The P-51d5 is still one of, if not the most iconic, or the most fun iconic plane when you work in a team, perhaps in the entire game. So ladies and gents, that's pretty much it for the video. I wish you all the best, and take care, and I'll catch you next time.